to see Avatar, and it was 3D, big production, 3D, and suddenly everyone was saying, oh, all the movie executives were saying, oh, 3D is the future of the cinema. Everything will be in 3D. And I'm thinking to myself, 3D with glasses, we had that in the 50s. There was a film called Moana Devil I went to see in 3D, and there was House of Wax 10 years later with Vincent Price. And even Hitchcock made a 3D movie called Dial M for Murder with 3D glasses, but no one ever even saw it in 3D because the 3D fad disappears after that one movie gets attention. So I said, I don't believe that 3D is the future of the cinema by any means, not with glasses. But I realized also that these were all the big executives saying it, and when they had 3D with glasses, they also upped the ticket price, $3, $4. So I said, this is a way to, you know, get the movie ticket price higher, because it's always been such a popular medium at popular prices that any trick they can use to make that price go up. They also said that now it's different, that 3D is the future, because televisions, modern televisions are very easy to show 3D, technically, and computer animation, like they do at Pixar, is very easy to do 3D. So now 3D with glasses is the future of the cinema. So I was sure, personally, that after a few years, even when the people have the choice, you can see the movie in 3D or not 3D, and it's $3 cheaper, you'll see it not 3D. I don't like to have glasses the whole time. It makes the image dark, it's irritating. So, but then it made me think, what is the future of cinema? If it's not 3D with glasses, what is it? So I thought about it a lot, and I came to the conclusion that the future of cinema, as best I can see, because you're looking a long distance into the future, is going to be in 3 areas. The first is the writing. Now, even the novel, which is what, maybe 400 years old, what's the first novel? Maybe Don Quixote, I don't know. Maybe Goethe. Who? Well, Dante's Inferno is an epic, but it's not really a novel. A novel is what we know is a romanza. So you think Don Quixote, which, by the way, I'm now, by coincidence, reading. I'm up to page 600. It is so funny. It's really a joy. You who Spanish language, read Don Quixote. It's a kick. It's really written almost for children. It is so funny and enjoyable. I'm really enjoying it. I was reading it last night in the hotel, you know. It's a very interesting piece. We all know Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. We have that image. But what's really going around in it is very funny. Oh, there's Goethe, who the great Goethe, the German scientist and poet and dramatist. He wrote several books which I would call novels. But the novel, even though it's existed, and of course the theater has existed for 3,000 years and probably before that, and these writing forms are constantly being reinvented. The novel started out one way, and then with different periods began to experiment with whose point of view are you reading in the novel. Is it just the author saying, oh, this happened, this person met that person? But then you began to get novels that took the point of view of the character. And then you took, like in Tolstoy, one chapter was the point of view of one character, and the next chapter was the point of view of the other character. The concept of point of view in dramatic writing is very important. Whose point of view are you giving, and how do they work together? So even within the writing of a screenplay, and of course in the novel, when you went into that fabulous French period where you had Flaubert and Abbe Prévost and Stendhal, all kinds of wonderful innovations in storytelling and in point of view. Then, of course, you got into the modernist period with the period of James Joyce and Virginia Woolf, where internal monologue and so even in the subject of only writing and writing for cinema, there is tremendous opportunity for innovation and change. And that's one of the three things that I think are going to determine the cinema of the future. What's going to be invented in the writing itself, which is nothing to do with the technology or the acting, just in how the author conceives of the story and how the storytelling is done. After all, think about it. In cinema, when the cinema was invented, which was this silent telling of stories through just images, many things came about that were invented that no one knew about. For example, the close-up. There was no precedent in theater. There was no close-up. So imagine how brave the first director who did a close-up was, because that was crazy. You know, how would the people accept all of a sudden you're looking at this big face, you know, or parallel editing. You know, you have the girl being tied to the railroad tracks, and then you cut suddenly to a train coming. That was crazy. How did they know that the audience would, the human mind would say, oh, the close-up is showing me the personality and what he's thinking, what he's feeling, or the parallel action is showing me that the train is going to come and hit the girl. They should be talking. They know more than I do. So, what I'm saying is that we haven't even begun to understand the possibilities of writing for cinema yet, because it's always connected to new advances in technology. In other words, those things of the close-up and parallel action and all the great elements of montage that the pioneers like Sergei Eisenstein or even Abel Gance did, they invented it because of the technology that was possible. Goethe lived before the cinema, but boy, he would have been a great film director because he was a scientist. He studied optics, he studied color, he was a poet, he was a dramatist, a man of the theater. I mean, to read Wilhelm Meister of Goethe is fascinating. You know, that was the first Fanny and Alexander in a way. And even Wilhelm Meister, which is Goethe's book, who was Wilhelm Meister? He was talking about the young German poet's first impression of Shakespeare. Wilhelm Meister, William the Master. Goethe was a master also. And his story of his alter ego, Wilhelm Meister, puts him against a great artist like Shakespeare. So what I'm saying is just the writing area has plenty more interest and evolution that will come than just 3D with glasses. Just in that one area of writing for the cinema, and being free to invent and change is extraordinary. A second category I thought, well, gee, I say, you know, movies is writing and acting. What about the documentary? Documentary is a legitimate, beautiful form. Yes?
Traducción al español, porfa.
Yeah. That is the second. The young lady was talking about this strange possibility of the hybrid between the script and fiction and the verita, the truth of the documentary. This is a whole second area that I think will blossom in the future. And I give as an example, it's very powerful when the documentary, and we all know that the documentary form, even though you're shooting actualities, that there's plenty of repeating and, okay, do that again. And in other words, the tools of fiction cinema are often used, even when they made Nanook of the North, I am sure, to make that kind of a film, you have to ask them, oh, would you please go and try to catch the fish again? And so documentary is not just, although it can be, you could be covering like Battle for Algiers was shot in a documentary style there in Algiers. Fabulous Battle of Algiers. I'm sure you have seen that. It's just a fabulous film. I can't praise it enough. So the documentary, as it will evolve and influence the fiction film or the cinema film, is another whole area. And I give as an example a beautiful film I saw recently by a very young Canadian woman named Sarah Polley. Has anyone seen the movie called Stories People Tell? Yes. I think that was totally impressed me, because here you begin with this documentary about her family, and then it becomes so personal that you almost feel you're intruding as an audience. So that combination of how the cinema in its documentary form can mix with the personal and the fiction form, in a sense. And let's be honest, when people write, novelists write, great novelists write, it's always personal, it's always pretty true. If you read Buddenbrooks of Thomas Mann, if you read F. Scott Fitzgerald, if you meet any author, they're writing in some way about themselves or their family. I mean, how can you not? I remember once Gia sent me a quote of Fitzgerald that said, you know, we have these few extraordinary things happen to us in our life, and everything we write is the retelling of that over and over again until the people don't want to buy the books anymore. But you know, when you write, and this is another big discussion we should have, is how personal should the cinema be? Because, you know, I mean, when you say I want to be a movie director, I always ask, well, do you want to be Steven Spielberg, who's a fine, great film director, or do you want to be Jarmusch? Do you want to be a film director because you're going to make a lot of money and be famous and do big movies and be acclaimed, or do you want to express something in you that's personal that you have to express? Because that's every one of you have to make that decision. Someone sometimes I say, well, we want both. That's the Holy Grail. It's possible. It's possible. But I still think you have to decide in your heart, how personal a filmmaker are you going to be? Are you going to make movies that are an expression of you and your view and your ideas and your thoughts, or are you going to take a great story that happened 100 years ago and just make that story? You can also take the story that happened 100 years ago and make it in a way that still is personal to you. Because I think the purpose of art is to illuminate contemporary life. You want to show other people the benefit of some way that they can go through the same things that we all go through, you know, how to navigate through contemporary life, how to be a human being today. And that's what art helps to show. It's like a headlight that shines on it for other people. So this idea of the documentary that can also become very personal, to me is important, because I always wanted to be a writer, and writers really are, even if they say they're writing the character is so-and-so, it's, you know, you read the work of Tennessee Williams, it's about him, always. He's Blanche Dubois. So that's a beautiful thing about art. The third area is extremely interesting, which I say there are three, I bet you there are 4 or 5. I don't really know everything, obviously. The third area, yes, go ahead.
Sí, te voy a preguntar en español. Si tiene pensado que en sus próximos proyectos haya algún tipo de inclusión en la experiencia o en la ficción sobre nuevas plataformas, nuevos medios. Respuesta en español.
Yeah, he's asked me if I am planning to use this in. I'm just an abuelo. My new project, you know. Yes, I'm very interested in the future, and I'm interested in doing personal work. As you know, I made 3 very cheap little low-budget films. I mean, low budget by what I had been doing before, all alone. I didn't have the wonderful photographers and art directors because I couldn't afford them. So I'm trying to be reborn as a student, really. What's the difference between a student film and a big professional film? Is the student doesn't have any resources. So I went to places without resources. But I will get to my own personal work. But the third area is very interesting, because now that the cinema is digital, pretty much, you know, everyone edits that I can think of, you know, Final Cut Pro or whatever the various softwares are, but they had it on computers. The movie theaters, I don't know, are you capable of showing film here at the school? You have film projectors still. Bravo. I still have my film projectors, but usually, yeah. But as you know, the movie theaters around the world, if they're not today, tomorrow, there will be digital projectors, and they're very fine. They're made possible by some incredible chips that enable you to put a lot of light through the chip, so you've got a big, it's not film, and film has its own quality which people love, and some people don't want to say goodbye to. But, so the projectors are digital, but so that when you go to a movie now, you're not seeing a can of film, by and large, glued together. You're seeing digital files that are shown on a digital projector. Because they're digital files, it means they don't necessarily have to be in that order. In other words, on Monday, you could show a movie, and on Monday afternoon, it could be a different movie. I mean, it could be subtly different, or the movie shown in one place could be a little, because the files are virtual files. It's not glued celluloid together. It's totally promiscuous, if I may use the word. That means, since it's happening that way, it means it could also be live. It means that the movie you see could be being performed for you by the film director and the actors, and you can see it as they're doing it and have the thrill of performance. So this became very interesting to me because I was a theater student. When I was 16 and 17, I used to do plays. I will take a second to talk a little bit about the 18th century or 19th century. In that time, before the cinema, there was a great tradition, especially in Germany, but also Italy, but mainly Germany, where you had what we call the virtuoso conductors. This name, virtuoso conductor, is really begun with Wagner. And then there were a whole succession of great conductors, and some of them were composers: Wagner, Van Bülow, Richard Strauss, Gustav Mahler, a whole, what have you, a bunch of them. And these were people very often were given an opera company in Berlin or in some German city, and they were given all the resources. And in a way, they were like film directors, because they didn't only train the orchestra and conduct the singers and tell them their interpretation, but they also worked with the art design, with the composer, with the writer, with the ballet, and they really, for 2 months, 3 months, rehearsed this incredible big production, but like a film director. But the difference is that upon the day of the performance, they stood up and they performed it, and it all performed under their baton. Imagine if you could see a movie, not a television play, of cinema. And we'll talk about the difference between cinema and television play. Imagine if you could see a new work by Marty Scorsese, say, and he would be performing it for you at the moment you're seeing it, in the theater, in the home, here, all over the world, live. That's possible today. It wasn't possible 4 years ago, but it's possible today. So my theory is that whenever there's a new kind of musical instrument, there's always some damn fool who's going to come along and want to play it. And that's what we have now with what I only can refer to as live cinema, which is this potential of there being a movie that is performed live. Now, we have had recorded art since probably 1830, when they did the first photographs. And this changed the art world tremendously, because now you didn't have to worry about painting a picture of her that would look exactly like her, because you could have a photograph of her. That means you could paint a picture of her that felt like her. So the painters became liberated to express beyond just the sheer likeness, because the photograph could do that better. And suddenly painting took all of those steps that we know happened after that. But also there was the Victrola, the Edison sound machine, so you could hear Caruso singing in your home. And it was a thrill. Or you could go to the Penny Arcade and you could see people moving. The famous story that when they showed the train arriving, that the people were so frightened in the theater they ran out of the room. So it was a thrill. But think about it, that's already now 180 years old, and we have been looking at canned art for all that time. Everything we look at is basically canned. It has been pre-thought, pre-edited. The acting timing is not the actor's timing, it's the editor's timing. And we have made masterpieces, more than you can count. There's more cinematic masterpieces that have been made in this 100 years that we could count. There are more than 100, there's more than 200. We can say there are more than 50 in the silent era alone. Just the films of what's his name? Well, we can talk about him, but who's the great German who made Nosferatu? Murnau. The films of Murnau, you know, the great Nosferatu, what's the one of the Doorman, or G.W. Pabst, Loveless Street. There are so many great silent films. In fact, Murnau said about the silent era, he said, sound had to come, but it came too soon. Because they were just discovering the flower of the cinema when it was silent. Much less after that, the work of Kurosawa, the work of so many Italians, you don't even know how it was possible. There were so many great Italians. Yes, young man.
Quisiera saber si es posible la traducción al español.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, excuse me.
No se entiende todo, algunos no entendemos toda la traducción.
Sí, sí, certo. What is the direction advise me? Should I go slower and do more translation? Explain generally what I'm talking about, that I'm talking. Basically explain that I'm talking that art has been recorded and canned without performance for 180 years already.
Bueno, últimamente lo último que está diciendo es que el arte de manera general ha sido como enlatado y interpretado durante los últimos 180 años, que es una manera, es decir, ha hablado de la evolución desde la novela, la fotografía, los principios del cine mudo y toda esa historia que nos ha traído hasta aquí, hasta un tiempo en el que todo está procesado.
Do you have a nice friend sitting next to you?
¿No tienes un amigo que esté sentado al lado tuyo?
No, you have someone who could maybe...
Está en Cuba, en español.
I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm very enthusiastic about this stuff, so
Discúlpeme, que me entusiasmo mucho con esto y me cuesta.
So my point is this, that something has been lost because of canned art. Everything is canned today. You look at the news in America, you know that's not really the real news. We're going to hear the real news in 6 months. What's going on with the United States and Iran? We don't know. It's not about the bomb. It's about something else. We'll find out in 6 months. Everything in life is canned, except for one thing.
Lo que estoy es lamentando que de alguna manera todo el arte ya está como enlatado, es decir, prehecho. Todo lo que estás recibiendo realmente, sabes, cuando ves el noticiero no son las noticias de lo que está pasando. Lo que está pasando en realidad te vas a enterar dentro de 6 meses. Hasta aquí todo te lo están procesando.
One thing is not canned. Who knows what it is?
Una sola cosa no está procesada. ¿Qué cosa es? ¿Quién lo sabe?
You know. Sports. When you see sports, you don't know what's going to happen. It hasn't happened already. You're waiting with them. When they're playing baseball, and it's the 9th inning, and the score is 1-1, and the bases are loaded, and there are 2 strikes. The pitcher doesn't know what's going to happen. The batter doesn't know what's happened, and you don't know what's going to happen. That's live.
En el deporte es decir, por ejemplo, estás viendo un juego de pelota, están 1-1, las bases están llenas, ni el pitcher ni el bateador saben lo que va a suceder, ni tú tampoco. Así es la vida.
Maybe a music concert is sort of live. That believe me, when Mick Jagger does his stuff, he's done it the same way every night. So.
Quizás un concierto de música, pero de alguna manera lo que hace Mick Jagger en el escenario ya lo ha hecho tantas veces.
So I became very interested in the fact that, you know, as we know, television, when in its inception, television is actually older than the cinema. There were forms of television that were being done in 1830, 1840. It would have been possible for television to come first before cinema, because the technology was there around the time of the invention of the telephone. That would have been interesting. What if television came first before cinema? Because when television finally came, it used the syntax and the language that had been created by the film directors. But what if television you couldn't record? So it was a different form.
Y por ejemplo, con la inserción de la televisión, de hecho la televisión pudo haber llegado antes que el cine porque ya sus primeros descubrimientos estaban hechos cerca de 1830. Hubiera sido interesante cómo hubiera evolucionado la historia si la televisión se hubiera desarrollado antes que el cine, pues cuando la televisión ya se convierte en lo que es, empieza a tomar la forma y la sintaxis del cine, algo que ya estaba descubierto.
In the 50s, the television tape, the digital recorder, what recorded it, was invented, I think, about 1956. So there was this golden age of television that happened around the world, but in America, where they made these beautiful live television productions. They were done live. Now, much has happened in television since that time, the video recorder, but because of sports and the Grammys and the Oscars, all these shows, a lot of technology